Yeah, a very moving day in Parliament in London today. Here in the studio, I'm joined tonight by Andreas Wolf. He is an award-winning journalist with the BBC. He's in Berlin right now. He's covering the continental angle on this Brexit story. Andreas, it's good to have you on the date with us. Do you run into anyone on continental Europe who is in favor of a Brexit?
I have to admit, I haven't run into anyone so far. And I think the reasons why Brexit supporters are much more numerous in the UK than they are on the continent, we have to look at identity, amongst other things. Mm-hmm. And this is something that hasn't really been talked about a lot in the debate in the UK and elsewhere. And I think one of the main reasons for it is that an argument on identity can't be won. You either have one identity or you have another. Whereas on the continent, in Germany and Italy and other countries, you do find people who say, I am German and I also feel European. Mm-hmm. These people aren't that numerous in the UK, although I personally live in Scotland, and I do find that there are more Scots who come up with this kind of identity than there are, I think, in England.
Yeah, I mean, the identity politics, it's like I was saying earlier in the show, I mean, it is key to this entire debate. I mean, when we hear the word immigration, that is basically just code for identity, right? Because the immigration is what can change the identity of an entire people. And there's the fear factor thrown into that.
Indeed, immigration has been one of the main points of argument, together with the economy. But I also think that the identity obviously has been formed over centuries, and we have to remember that the UK had the biggest empire, the British Empire, where the sun never sets,
right.
Which is, of course, nowadays still kind of continued through the Commonwealth, this identity, I'm saying.
But that makes it then all the more surprising to someone from the outside looking at Britain. I mean, you would even think that the UK is almost the mothership for the melting pot. Right?
Indeed. But I've spoken to people, and they're not, as they're sometimes portrayed, narrow-minded racists. They are people like, for example, I've spoken to a businessman who's got a small IT business in London, and he says, well, he thinks that the EU is somewhat provincial, and he wants to look much wider. He thinks that, you know, the world are their stage.
Okay, that is interesting you bring up the point of the EU being provincial because of, you know, we had earlier today a British politician, Sayida Warsi. She went from, or she changed colors, basically. She was a pro-Brexit politician. Now she is a pro-stay. And let's just listen to the soundbite of her explaining why she decided to change.
I've been concerned about the posters that have been used. I mean, what we've consistently heard over the last 2 months is that the Turks are coming, the terrorists are coming, the Syrians are coming, the refugees are coming, the Muslims are coming. This is not the kind of campaign that we should be running. This is not the vision that we should have for a pro-Brexit Britain.
Now, let me play devil's advocate here. I mean, you get the impression from her that she's surprised that this tone and that the content has arisen the way it has. But couldn't anyone have seen this coming when you listen to what, you know, Farage and UKIP, what they've said in the past?
I guess so, yes. But we have to say that on both sides of the argument here, arguments have been put forward that weren't all... That's on both sides of the argument, the truth has been bent at times. And arguments have been brought forward that weren't maybe as wise as one would have wished.
Yeah. I want to play now a soundbite from the former mayor of London, Boris Johnson. He basically came out of the closet, if you will, the immigration closet yesterday and said that he is pro-immigration and he is a pro-Brexiter. Take a listen to this.
I'm not only pro-immigration, I'm pro-immigrants, and I am in favour of an amnesty for illegal immigrants who have been here for more than 12 years, unable to contribute to this economy, unable to pay taxes, unable to take proper part in society. And I'll tell you why. Because it is the humane thing to do, it is the economically rational thing to do, and it means taking back control of a system that is at the moment completely out of control.
Okay, we're not going to let him get away easily with that. All right, it's the humane thing to do. Would he have said that had there been no Joe Cox murder?
Well, that's a very difficult question for me to answer.
But what's your feel? I mean, you're from the UK. I mean, what's your take on that? Because it feels like there's a lot of pandering.
I think it may well have been a tactical move. I mean, I think the Leave campaign has long argued that they aren't totally against immigrants. They just want to have a say on who is going to be let in. You know, a points-based system and not this blanket permission for anyone from the EU, the freedom of movement, that is, of course, to come into the UK. So I think that it's maybe not entirely surprising to hear this from him today.
We have a soundbite just from an average person in the UK. I want to play that for you because we were listening to a lot today, and this one really stood out. Let's take a listen.
I believe that we're living under an illusion that we are still great. I don't know about leaving the European market because I don't know the effects of it, but I feel we should have a kind of reality check.
You know, that was interesting. Is the UK still living the empire dream in a way? Is that also driving this Brexit campaign?
Well, that at least is what some of the pro-EU people are saying, that there is still this empire dream and at least this empire history. And, you know, the follow-on organisation, the Commonwealth, they are still kept alive very much. For example, through the Commonwealth Games, which were in Glasgow only 2 years ago. But I think we also maybe should be talking about the options that are now ahead of the UK if they leave the EU. And even if they do decide to leave the EU, they would still have to have some kind of a deal with the EU, wouldn't they?
Right.
And the options there, well, if we look at Norway or Switzerland, they would probably have to still accept freedom of movement of people, and they would still have to pay into the pot, and they would still have to take many of the rules from the EU. So the question is, would they really be getting what they're looking for?
Yeah, excellent question. It may not be as simple as in or out. Andreas Wolf with the BBC covering the continental angle to this story. Andreas, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in. It's always good to have a man from Scotland here at the big table. Thank you.